February 19, 1945, near Iwo Jima, Pacific Ocean. The sun rises slowly over the gray waters of the Pacific, its light glinting off the churning waves below. Aboard the USS Houston, Lieutenant Colonel Howard H. Lee watches the horizon, his breath misting in the cold morning air. The ocean smells of salt and oil, the ship creaking as it sails toward one of the most perilous landing zones in the Pacific theater. You can hear the hum of the engines, the chatter of the men preparing themselves below deck, and the faint whisper of nerves running through the air. Around them the ocean stretches endlessly, but the tiny speck of land in the distance, Iwo Jima, is all that matters. For the men aboard the USS Houston, it's the beginning of something brutal. But to the Japanese defending the island, it's just another day. The island of Iwo Jima, though strategically important, had long been underestimated by the Japanese themselves. The Americans will never be able to take this island, they said, and even if they did, it would cost them dearly. The Japanese military had dug in deep. In fact, it wasn't just the island they were defending, it was a symbol, a place where the pride of the empire would be preserved or shattered. The defensive positions were set into the very heart of the island, hidden beneath the volcanic rock. Caves, tunnels, bunkers, Iwo Jima had it all. But the men who would come ashore on that fateful morning were no strangers to hell. As Lieutenant Colonel Lee looks to the horizon, he can almost hear the distant roar of artillery. His Marines, tough and determined, have already fought across the Pacific, pushing island by island from Guadalcanal to Tarawa, and now they were coming for Iwo Jima. They had been mocked by the Japanese, who believed that this would be just another victory for the empire. But Lee knew better. The men he led were unlike anything the Japanese had expected. These Marines had been forged in the crucible of combat, and they had one mission: to win, no matter the cost. February 19, 1945, the shores of Iwo Jima. The first wave of Marines hits the beach with a thunderous roar. The assault craft hit the black sand with a jarring thud, and as the ramp drops, the men rush out, their boots sinking into the ash-like sand. The scene is chaotic. Explosions ring out as shells from Japanese artillery smash into the water around them. A cloud of smoke and debris rises into the air, masking the view of the island. The Marines push forward, rifles in hand, helmets low, eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Sergeant John Jack Thompson, a grizzled veteran of Guadalcanal, charges forward with his squad. The Japanese had made it clear they weren't going to give up this island easily. As Thompson sprints toward the edge of the beach, he can already hear the distinct snap of enemy machine gun fire. They've been prepared. The island had been transformed into an almost impenetrable fortress. His M1 Garand rifle barks, the recoil slamming into his shoulder as he fires at the entrenched Japanese positions ahead. He knows the drill by now. Duck, shoot, move. Keep moving. The Marines begin to inch forward, taking cover in whatever they can find, but the Japanese are ready. For the first time in the Pacific Campaign, the Marines realize how deep this battle is going to be. There's no quick victory. Here, from the cliffs above, Japanese soldiers pour machine gun fire down into the assault waves, picking off Marines with brutal precision. The beach becomes a killing field. Marines fall, and the sound of their bodies hitting the sand blends with the roar of the advancing artillery and the screams of the wounded. Through the smoke, Thompson glimpses a Japanese soldier, barely visible in a reinforced pillbox. Without hesitation, he fires, the sharp crack of his Garand piercing the chaos. The Japanese soldier slumps forward, his machine gun falling silent, but the battle is far from over. By midday, after hours of intense fighting, the Marines have barely made a dent in the island's defenses. The Japanese are not retreating. They are not even showing signs of fear. Instead, they are entrenched in their positions, waiting for the Marines to exhaust themselves. Sergeant Thompson wipes blood from his brow, watching as another wave of Marines comes ashore. They've taken ground, but it's costing them. And the Japanese are far from beaten. This island, they realize, will be different. February 20th, 1945, the hills of Iwo Jima. The first night on Iwo Jima is a blur of gunfire and shadows. Marines move cautiously through the jagged volcanic rock, their movements slow and deliberate. The sounds of distant explosions echo through. the caves and tunnels that crisscross the island like a deadly web. As the moonlight barely illuminates the landscape, it's clear that the Japanese have no intention of surrendering. They've dug in, and they're prepared to fight to the last man. Lieutenant Colonel Lee and his officers have gathered in a makeshift command post, a small cave sheltered by rocks. The air smells of smoke and sweat. Maps of the island are spread across a battered wooden table, marked with red and blue pins that represent both American progress and resistance. Lee takes a long drag from his cigarette, staring at the map, with narrowed eyes. The assault had cost more than they had anticipated, but they had pushed inland. Barely. "You've seen the reports," he says to his officers, his voice low but firm. "We'll need more firepower, heavy artillery, airstrikes. We can't give them a chance to regroup." His voice cracks through the tense silence as the officers nod, exchanging glances. The Japanese have fortified every inch of this island, caves, bunkers, and miles of hidden tunnels. They don't just hold Iwo Jima, they've turned it into an unbreakable stronghold. The American forces have encountered resistance like no other they've faced in the Pacific Campaign. For the first time, they realize that this battle will not be decided by the will of the Americans alone. The Japanese forces are as determined as they are. Meanwhile, Sergeant Thompson and his squad are dug in along a ridge, watching the Japanese positions below. Thompson adjusts his helmet, eyeing the enemy's machine gun nests. His radio crackles to life, and a familiar voice comes through. It's Corporal Stevens, his best friend, calling in a report from the far left flank. "The enemy's not breaking," Stevens says, his voice tight with frustration. "We've lost too many men, and we've barely moved forward. These bastards aren't giving an inch." Thompson clenches his jaw, his hand tightening around his rifle. He knew this wouldn't be easy, but nothing could have prepared him for the level of resistance they were facing. The Japanese soldiers, their faces hidden behind the camouflage bunkers, seemed to pop up out of nowhere. The Marines had fought through the blood-soaked beaches of Tarawa, the scorching heat of Guadalcanal, but here, on Iwo Jima, it feels different. The relentless barrage of machine gun fire keeps the Marines pinned down, preventing them from advancing. Then, as if the island itself is fighting back, an earthquake shakes the ground beneath them. It's not nature, but the rumble of more artillery as the Japanese retaliate with their own heavy guns. The Marines duck low, the ground shaking violently as explosions ripple through the terrain. The Japanese aren't giving up, they're not retreating, they're holding their ground with a ferocity that was almost unmatched by anything the Marines had seen so far. It's a realization that stuns the Americans. This island, once thought to be a mere stepping stone, is now a monumental test of endurance, strength, and willpower. Thompson looks up at the sky, hoping for air support, but the clouds are thick, the weather unpredictable. Every minute on this island feels like an eternity. He's seen men fall beside him, and every step forward feels like it's costing more than it's worth. Yet he knows they can't stop now. Too much has been sacrificed. February 23, 1945, the heights of Iwo Jima. By the fifth day, the battle for Iwo Jima has descended into a nightmare of violence and loss. The island is alive with smoke, fire, and the endless roar of artillery. The Marines continue to push inland, but the terrain is unforgiving: volcanic rock, steep hills, and jagged cliffs. Every step forward feels like a victory, but every victory is earned at a steep price. Lieutenant Colonel Lee stands on the ridge overlooking the battleground below. The island is pocked with craters, and the air smells of burning metal and charred flesh. The Japanese defenses seem endless, and for every inch they gain, they lose far more than they can afford. The Marines, though exhausted and bloodied, are still pushing forward. Their resolve has not wavered. They know that if they give up now, the cost will be unimaginable. The Japanese, however, are just as resolute. Hidden in their bunkers, they continue to fire relentlessly, refusing to surrender. Sergeant Thompson's squad is on the front lines, huddled behind a rock formation, watching the chaotic scene unfold. Thompson looks out across the battlefield, the distant sound of explosions and gunfire reverberating through his skull. His men are tense, their eyes wide with the kind of fear that only comes with sustained, unrelenting combat. "Stevens," Thompson calls to his friend, "how many do we have left?" Stevens shakes his head grimly. "5 of us, including you and me. We've lost more than half the squad. The numbers are stark, but Thompson doesn't let it show. The reality is too harsh. Iwo Jima is not just a fight for control of a small island in the Pacific. It has become a fight for survival. The Japanese are not retreating. They are fighting with a desperation that comes from knowing their defeat is imminent. Every hour that passes, the pressure mounts. As Thompson looks back at his squad, he sees the fear in their eyes, but also something else: determination. They've fought through the hardest days of their lives, but something has changed. They've begun to realize that this battle, this brutal, unyielding struggle, will be the turning point of the war in the Pacific. The Japanese may have mocked them before, but now they understand the true strength of the U.S. Marines. It's on the 23rd of February, as they advance up the heavily defended slopes toward Mount Suribachi, that the Marines begin to taste victory. But at an agonizing cost. The enemy is entrenched and stubborn, hiding in caves and tunnels that the Marines cannot easily access. The Japanese use the island's treacherous terrain to their advantage, launching ambushes and trapping Marines in narrow choke points, but the men of the 28th Marine Regiment, part of the 5th Division, will not be deterred. They push on, moving ever closer to Mount Suribachi, a towering peak that dominates the island. It is here at the base of the mountain that the Marines make their most significant realization. They have gained the upper hand, but only because they've become as relentless as the enemy they've been fighting. As Thompson and his squad push forward, they hear the first whispers of victory. The Japanese, realizing the battle is lost, begin to retreat to their final positions. It is a hard-earned, blood-soaked realization, but they are still moving. The Marines, despite everything they have lost, are still advancing. Suddenly, the Marines' radio crackles to life, a message that will change the course of the battle. And the war itself. Mount Suribachi is within reach. Get ready for the flag, the voice says. February 23, 1945, Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima. The air is thick with the stench of gunpowder and the distant roar of artillery, but amid the chaos, something remarkable is about to unfold. As the Marines of the 28th Regiment press closer to the summit of Mount Suribachi, they know the end of the battle is near, but they are also painfully aware that the hardest part is still ahead. Sergeant Thompson and his squad, along with other Marines, inch their way up the steep, treacherous slopes of Suribachi, dodging sniper fire and the occasional mortar explosion. Every step is a battle, but they are no longer fighting for just themselves. Each Marine is fighting for every man who has fallen, for the memory of those who will never see home again. At the top of the mountain, a platoon of Marines from the 28th Regiment, under the command of Sergeant Mike Strank, begin the task of hoisting the American flag, a simple act, but one that will echo through history. As they reach the summit, the group of Marines takes a moment to survey the island. Below them, it's a grim sight. The island, once defended by thousands of entrenched Japanese soldiers, now lies in ruins. But in this small corner of hell, amidst the carnage and devastation, they begin to set up the flagpole. The sky above Iwo Jima is a dull gray, the smoke from the ongoing battle still heavy in the air, but as they unfurl the American flag and raise it, something incredible happens. A silence falls over the men for a brief moment, not because the battle has ceased, but because this simple act of defiance and resolve represents everything they've fought for. This is no longer just an island. This is a symbol of what the Marines have endured, of what they will continue to fight for. As the flag rises, the men below cheer, their voices breaking through the thick tension in the air. For a moment, the violence of the battle seems to fade into the background, replaced by a wave of emotion that sweeps through the men who witnessed it. But the fight is far from over. The Japanese soldiers, though demoralized, are not finished. They know the Americans are close, and they have one final defense to mount. The flag, while a powerful symbol of the American victory, does not signify the end of the battle. For Sergeant Thompson and the other Marines, it is just another milestone in the long road ahead. Below, the battlefield continues to rage. The Japanese positions, though broken and scattered, are still holding strong. Sniper fire comes from the hills, machine. Guns rattle from hidden positions, and mortars continue to fall. The Marines are caught between the symbolism of the flag and the brutal reality of the fight. As the Marines secure the flag on Mount Suribachi, the moment is not lost on Lieutenant Colonel Lee, who watches the scene unfold from his position. He knows this flag represents more than just a victory on Iwo Jima. It's a turning point in the Pacific War. It signals that the Japanese Empire is finally on the defensive, that even the most entrenched and seemingly invincible positions could be overcome by the relentless determination of the American forces. The flag is a symbol of defiance. It's a statement that the Marines have proven what the Japanese had long mocked, that no matter how fierce the resistance, no matter how steep the odds, the U.S. Marines will push through. February 26, 1945, Iwo Jima. The flag has been raised, but the battle rages on. For the Marines, that iconic moment on the summit of Mount Suribachi is both a triumph and a stark reminder that their work is far from done. Though the Japanese have been forced into a retreat, they still fight with a tenacity that seems unyielding. Hidden in the labyrinth of tunnels, caves, and bunkers beneath Iwo Jima, they continue to resist with every ounce of strength they have left. Sergeant Thompson and his men, bloodied and fatigued, are ordered to push forward once again. The sounds of artillery and gunfire fill the air, but now there is an added sense of urgency. The Japanese, though isolated and surrounded, are determined to hold on. The Americans have taken the highest point of the island, but there are still pockets of resistance, fierce, calculated, and desperate. Thompson leads his squad through the rubble of a destroyed village, the shattered remnants of what was once a thriving Japanese stronghold. The landscape is almost unrecognizable, reduced to nothing but a series of scorched earth and ruins. Every step taken is measured as the Marines move cautiously, their rifles ready, eyes scanning the jagged terrain for any sign of enemy movement. The island is alive with tension. Every corner is a potential trap, every turn an opportunity for the Japanese to launch a final deadly counterattack. The fighting is so close now that the Marines can smell the acrid stench of cordite and sweat mingling in the humid air. The heat of the sun beats down on them, their uniforms soaked with sweat and the dust of the island's volcanic ash. By the end of February 26, despite the relentless assaults and near-constant firefights, the Americans have gained control of nearly 80% of the island. But the cost is steep. Casualties continue to climb as the Japanese wage their final desperate defenses. The beachhead has turned into a slaughterhouse, with the Marines facing stiff resistance from the remaining Japanese forces, who fight not for victory, but for honor. Thompson, now battle-worn and covered in grime, wipes the sweat from his brow. His squad is down to just 3 men, including him. The Marines have been ordered to clear a final stronghold, an entrenched Japanese position deep in the southern section of the island. Thompson knows this will be their most dangerous task. Yet, as they advance, Thompson's heart pounds in his chest. His mind races, the faces of the fallen flashing before his eyes. Every man lost is a reminder of what they're fighting for, but also a reminder of the toll war takes on the soul. The final push is brutal. The Japanese, though greatly diminished, are far from beaten. They fight with an intensity that surprises even the most seasoned Marines. The enemy has no reinforcements. They have no way out. Yet they continue to fight with everything they have, because they know there is no honor in surrender. The last resistance is crushed on March 1, 1945, nearly 2 weeks after the first wave of Marines made landfall. The island is secured, but it is a hollow victory. Over 6,000 American Marines have been killed, and nearly 19,000 have been wounded. For the Japanese, the cost is even higher. Almost all of the 21,000 defenders have perished, either in battle or in the aftermath of their surrender. Thompson stands on the ridge overlooking the devastated landscape. He has seen his comrades die in ways that words cannot describe. He's fought through hell and back, but now, as the battle finally comes to a close, there's no sense of celebration. There is only the overwhelming weight of loss. The island of Iwo Jima is a symbol now, a grim monument to the strength, sacrifice, and unyielding resolve of the Marines who fought for it. But for Thompson, and for so many others, the true cost of that victory is etched into the very earth they stand upon. The blood of thousands has soaked the soil of Iwo Jima, and the ghosts of those who died here will forever haunt the island. Marines had been mocked. They had been underestimated by the Japanese, who believed they would never be able to take the island. But in the end, the Japanese realized their mistake. The Americans, driven by a determination and strength they never anticipated had proven their worth, and Iwo Jima, once considered a fortress, was now in the hands of the United States, a victory forged in blood and fire. As Sergeant Thompson looks toward the horizon, the distant sound of aircraft echoes in the sky. The war is not over yet, but the tide has turned. The battle for Iwo Jima has proved to the Japanese that the U.S. Marines were no longer just soldiers to be dismissed. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they would not stop until they had won the war.